She began the game in a way that few players can. Aggressive positioning, early ball movement, pressure on the defense from the opening possession. The floor felt different with her operating at full capacity. Defenders had to account for her range. Spacing opened. Indiana moved with a tempo that suited its personnel. For a brief period, the Fever looked like a team that understood exactly what it had in Clark and intended to build around it. Then something changed. What is not a gradual decline. It was not the typical ebb and flow of a preseason game where rotations shuffle and minutes get managed. It was abrupt. One stretch of play, she was central. The next, she was not. The ball moved away from her. The offensive structure shifted. Her presence on the floor remained, but the way the team used her did not. That contrast between the early urgency and the later quiet is what generated the most discussion after the final buzzer. When a player of Clark's profile goes from dictating the offense to operating at the margins of it within the same game, people notice. They notice not because they are looking for problems, but because the difference is visible. And visibility is something Caitlin Clark has never lacked. The first quarter gave fans exactly what they came to see. Clark came in attacking, not waiting. She was not standing at the arc looking for a catch-and-shoot opportunity. She was probing, creating, putting pressure on the defense to respond. When she plays that way, the game opens up. Ball handlers with her kind of range force defenders to make choices, and those choices create cracks. Indiana was exploiting those cracks early. The offense had rhythm, it had direction. Then came the shift that drew every camera and every conversation toward it. After an early burst of activity from Clark, the offense began to run differently. The ball did not find her at the same rate. Her on-ball time decreased. She was still moving, still occupying space, but the possessions were not flowing through her the way they had been. And once that changed, the feel of the game changed with it. This is where context matters. Preseason basketball is by design a laboratory. Coaching staffs try things, they test combinations, they run sets that may not appear in the regular season. They evaluate players who need evaluation and monitor players who need monitoring. All of that is understood. But even within that framework, the specific way Clark's usage changed stood out. It did not read like routine experimentation. It read like something was being worked through. There was also a visual detail that quickly became part of the broader conversation. Clark appeared to be wearing what looked like a back brace, or at minimum, some form of support around the midsection. Whether that was a standard brace, a compression device, or something else has not been explained publicly. But the image registered immediately with viewers. When a player of Clark's stature is seen with any kind of visible support equipment, it raises questions. That is not an overreaction. That is attention, and the attention is proportional to the stakes. Fans who follow Clark closely are already operating at a heightened level of awareness. Every visual cue gets processed. Every change in movement pattern gets logged. So when the back brace appeared on screen, it did not just float past. It stopped people. It became, within minutes, one of the most discussed details from the entire game. Was she managing discomfort? Was it preventative? Was it routine? Nobody said, and the silence around it only extended the conversation. That is also where Stephanie White entered the picture. A camera caught the Indiana head coach engaged in what appeared to be a direct pointed sideline exchange with Clark, and based on the timing, the exchange appeared to precede the noticeable reduction in Clark's involvement. Whether that conversation was a correction, an instruction, a tactical adjustment, or something entirely unrelated to Clark's offensive role, nobody outside the locker room knows. But the visual created a moment that viewers latched onto. Coaches and star players have sideline conversations constantly. Most go unnoticed. This one did not. The reason it mattered is because of what came after it. Immediately following that exchange, Clark's usage changed. Whether the conversation caused the change or simply coincided with it is unknowable from the outside. But the sequence stuck in people's minds. Hot start, sideline moment, quieter roll. When three things happen in that order, people draw lines between them whether or not the lines are accurate. White, for her part, is not a new presence on the bench. She has coached at this level before and has a clear vision for how she wants Indiana to play. Her style tends to emphasize structure, team movement, and balanced ball distribution. Whether that vision fully aligns with giving a player of Clark's ability maximum on-ball freedom is a question that will play out over the course of the season. But the preseason is where those philosophical frameworks get their first public test. And in this game, the test raised more questions than it answered. Now, zooming out from Clark specifically, the Fever did have contributors who played well. Justine Pissotterie was one of them. Her performance drew genuine enthusiasm from viewers, and not without reason. She showed range on her shot and made decisions with the ball that suggested she has more to offer than her previous opportunities have allowed. Her passing in particular drew attention, not just for its accuracy, but for the timing and awareness behind it. Viewers who had not spent much time watching her before came away impressed, and several made clear they want to see her get more consistent minutes as the season progresses. Raven Johnson also showed well. Johnson's game is built around energy and decision-making, and both were on display here. She is not a player who forces things. She plays within the structure, makes quick reads, and has the defensive instincts to stay on the floor in high-pressure situations. Her flashes in this game reinforce the sense that Indiana has real depth at the guard position, which matters because guard depth is what allows a team to absorb the kinds of rhythmic disruptions that happened in this game without completely losing its footing. Sophie Cunningham brought something different: physicality and assertiveness. She was not passive. She attacked the defense. She defended with conviction. She made shots when given the opportunity. Cunningham is not a player who tends to dominate highlights, but in this game she played with a sharpness that made her presence felt throughout the lineup. Her contributions during the stretches when Clark was less involved were among the reasons Indiana stayed competitive and eventually secured the win. That last point is worth sitting with, because the fact that Indiana maintained cohesion and won the game even during the stretches where Clark was not the offensive focal point is either reassuring or complicated depending on how you interpret it. The reassuring read: the roster has enough talent to function when one player is not at full capacity. The more complicated read: the offense worked differently enough when Clark was less involved that it raises questions about which version of the team the coaching staff intends to build around. These are not mutually exclusive readings. Both can be true. The Fever can have legitimate supporting talent and still face real questions about how best to maximize the player who brings them their highest ceiling. Those two things coexist, and that tension is what makes the coming weeks of preseason worth watching carefully. The Liberty were the opposing team, and their night had its own rough patches. There were missed looks around the rim that the New York coaching staff would want corrected. The conversation around their guard and center combinations, specifically, questions about whether Jonquel Jones and Hanzu can be deployed together more effectively, emerged from this game as something New York will need to work through. The Liberty have the talent to be a serious team this season, but this performance left visible gaps that they will need to address before the games count. That said, New York was not the focus of most of the post-game conversation. Indiana was, and within Indiana's narrative, Clark was the gravitational center, as she almost always is, and likely will be for as long as she plays at this level. The question of how a coaching staff should deploy Caitlin Clark is not a trivial one. She is not a conventional point guard. She is not a conventional shooting guard. She occupies a unique space in the offense because she can operate as a primary creator, as a shooter off movement, as a playmaker in transition, or as a half-court engine depending on what the team needs. That versatility is an asset, but it also means decisions about her role carry more weight than they would for a player with a narrower profile. When you tell a player like that to do less in one area, you are not simply making a positional adjustment. You are reshaping how the entire offense breathes. The on-ball versus off-ball question will hover over Indiana all season. When Clark initiates, she creates pressure that benefits everyone around her. When she moves off the ball, she can still produce. Her shooting is accurate enough, her movement crisp enough to remain a threat without the ball. But whether the team is better when she is running pick-and-roll actions versus when she is relocating to the arc is a question that will be answered over time, through wins and losses, through stretches of rhythm and stretches of stagnation. What this preseason game did was open that question publicly, earlier than perhaps the coaching staff would have preferred. The first game of preseason is an unusual place to spark a philosophical debate about a team's offensive identity, but that is what happened, because the visual evidence was clear enough that it could not be explained away with a simple "it's just preseason." People saw what they saw. One of the more measured responses to all of this is the point that preseason is exactly the place where coaching staffs try things that might not work. The entire purpose of these early games is to create information, run a set, see how it goes, move a player, observe the effect, adjust a rotation, evaluate the impact. None of that constitutes a final decision. None of it represents a commitment to a season-long structure. The Fever may come out in their regular season opener looking completely different from what this game suggested. That is possible, but even granting all of that, what viewers are responding to is not a predetermined conclusion. They are responding to a feeling. The feeling that the offense ran more smoothly when Clark was central. The feeling that something tightened when she was not. The feeling that a player who can do what she can do should probably be doing it for more than a few minutes at a stretch. Feelings are not facts, but they are also not nothing. They reflect something real about what the eye sees, and what the eye saw in this game was a contrast that generated concern. That concern is proportional to what Clark means to this franchise. She is not a role player who can be slotted in and out without affecting the product. She is the reason Indiana's preseason opener was a nationally discussed event. She is the reason the camera caught her sideline exchange with the coach and it became a topic. She is the reason the back brace became a storyline. That level of attention is not something a franchise generates overnight. It is the product of what she has already shown, what she already represents, and what people genuinely believe she is capable of over the course of a full season. When a player of that magnitude looks even slightly diminished in any context, the reaction is immediate and substantial. That is the nature of her visibility. It is also the nature of the responsibility that comes with coaching a player in her position. Every decision about her role is a public decision. Every adjustment to her usage will be observed, analyzed, and argued over. That scrutiny is not going away. If anything, it intensifies as the season moves forward and the stakes increase. There is also a straightforward basketball argument for why her usage matters so much. Teams that have elite ball handlers who can create advantages at the point of attack are most effective when those players touch the ball. Not exclusively. Any good offense distributes the ball, moves personnel, and varies its attack. But the baseline has to be that the best playmaker on the floor is making plays. If Indiana decides that Clark is their best playmaker, and the evidence from last season strongly supports that conclusion, then the question of whether she is getting the ball enough is always a legitimate one. The counter-argument that spreading touches around, developing other options, and not leaning exclusively on one player produces a more sustainable offensive system also has merit. Teams that are one-dimensional, even when that one dimension is elite, are vulnerable to defensive game plans. Defenses that can key on a single initiator and take away their preferred actions can neutralize even exceptional players. Building a multi-threat offense is not a bad idea. It is in fact sound coaching philosophy. The debate then is not about whether to build around Clark, it is about how much. It is about where the line is between giving her enough touches to create genuine pressure and spreading things enough that the offense does not become predictable. That is a nuanced question, and one that will not be answered in a preseason game. But the preseason game started the conversation, and the conversation will continue until the answer becomes clear. What makes this moment genuinely interesting for Indiana is that they have real pieces around Clark that could support multiple approaches. Pissotterie's ability to make decisions with the ball gives the team a secondary creator. Johnson's defensive energy and pace give the team a stabilizer. Cunningham's physical presence and shooting give the team a secondary threat. These are not just role fillers. These are players who, when used correctly, could make the Fever a genuinely difficult team to game plan against. If the coaching staff finds the right combination of Clark's creation and her teammates' complementary skills, Indiana could be dangerous. But that balance has to be found. And this preseason opener, whatever its ultimate significance, made clear that the search is still ongoing. The early portions of the game showed what is possible when Clark is allowed to operate at full capacity. The later portions raised questions about what the plan looks like when she is not. Both of those data points matter. Neither one resolves anything yet. For now, the season has barely begun. Preseason is what it is, an early, imperfect, incomplete version of what a team will eventually become. Indiana won the game. Their young talent showed flashes, and their star player demonstrated in the opening minutes why there is so much attention on this team heading into the year. But those opening minutes also gave way to a stretch of the game that will not be forgotten quickly. The contrast between the two halves of Clark's night, the sharp, aggressive start and the quieter, more peripheral finish, is what people are carrying with them. Not because they have already decided what it means, but because they know what they saw and they want to know whether the coaching staff saw the same thing. That is the real story from Indiana's preseason opener, not the win, not the box score, not the rotating minutes and the experimental lineups. The story is a question that has no answer yet, but that thousands of people are already asking. What changed? And more to the point, why?